Thank you for all being here. I think Bob was a little too gracious, and you might change your mind in a little bit. My style is usually, I encourage questions as I speak. I'd like to split this into two things. One, my personal experience with after the normalization, working with Israeli business people. And then the second, talk a little bit about economic freedom. So I studied in the United States, so I had many Jewish friends, a few Israeli friends, and my graduate advisor for 6 years was Israeli, born Israeli. And so I was exposed to some of the things. I knew a little bit of what to expect, but it was something completely different when I joined. So on the 15th of this month is the 3rd year anniversary of the signing of the Abraham Accords. On the 27th of this month is the 3-year anniversary of my being a partner at Our Crowd. John Medved, the CEO and founder of Our Crowd, I found this out later. As a partner, I'm supposed to be part of the weekly management meeting. He was so scared that I would be offended by how Israeli business people talk at each other because he'd worked here, that I would leave. So he didn't invite me the first 2 weeks. I didn't know why, so I just said, you have to invite me. Why not? Am I getting pushed out already? So again, I find out later that he told all the other partners, no one is to start shouting. Because if you don't know the Israeli business, especially VC, they do a lot of shouting. That's the Israelis laughing, because that's affirmation. And so I get on, and within 2 minutes, John forgot the order he'd given and started shouting at a guy called Alan. You're not doing this, you're not doing that. And I'm sitting there thinking, because in Emirati and Bahraini culture, I don't know that much about Moroccan culture, but in Emirati and Bahraini culture, if the boss starts shouting, that guy's out within a month. Then Alan starts shouting back. I'm like, he's going to be out by the end of the day. and I'm just sitting there. And as Alan's shouting back at John, John realizes that he made a mistake, sends me a private message, please don't quit. I'm not quitting. Can I sell tickets, please? This is, but here's the difference. A lot have heard about this aggressive culture. Here's one of the differences. 20 minutes later, Alan gives some good news about something else completely. John's like, great job, Alan. I'm just in shock. In the Emirates, I once missed a meeting. It wasn't my fault. It was the fault of the person I'm supposed to be meeting, very senior person. His assistant messed up. I missed it for 2 years. He wouldn't give me a meeting again. And that's the difference. We have what we might call a polite culture, Israelis might call as too passive. But we never forgive. Israelis, though, they're quick to light up, but they'll forgive quickly. So what am I trying to get across here? Yes, a few jokes and so on, but the important thing is when you see something in a new culture that you think is very different, look to see what the opposite side is, what the balance is. And I can give you many such stories, which you won't believe, certainly were a shock for me. But I would encourage everybody to try to learn from each other and to build those relationships. Because one of the saddest things for me is I remain the only, at least at a senior level, Emirati who is a partner at an Israeli firm. There's great opportunities here. It's not about peace, it's not about, this is about business, private sector. There's opportunities and it's being missed. And I think more of these interactions will lead to that. So if you read the news a lot, you will hear talk about, oh, there's not the investment people were talking about, there's not the technology transfer, there's not this, that, there's not the other. And unfortunately, as with anything good that happens, expectations shoot up very quickly without an understanding of what happens. So I'd like to give you my sort of understanding, having a direct experience in this. I'm not some analyst or some journalist. I have direct experience in this. First of all, people were talking about Israeli VCs and Israeli startups thinking about the UAE as just an ATM. The real issue I found is that Israelis have been doing business with the rest of the world. Why spend a year or two to get to know a new market when you can pick up the phone to New York or San Francisco and in 30 minutes just fill your coffers? Because you have had those relationships for decades. By the same token, the Emirates has been doing business with the rest of the world for decades. Why rush into investing in a new market when you have huge markets like the US alone that you have offices in and you do business in? That, to me, was the real issue, not in trade. I'm not talking about trade. Trade's been doing well. I'm talking about private sector to private sector investment business, commercial business. So why should people bother? I think people should bother for several reasons. Because there's opportunity. One opportunity is the world outside of the Gulf, financial world, has tanked badly. So picking up that phone and getting it answered is now really difficult. If you see valuations globally for startups, they've tanked over 50%. Whereas here, we actually have a robust economy. The flip side is there's opportunities. I've tried working with, for example, US, prior to the Abraham Accords, with US companies and Western European companies to get them to pay attention. They don't pay attention to us. Because if you're a US company, I'll use that as an example, the US is such a huge market that nobody wants to bother to look at other markets. It's only when they become massive multinationals that they start doing it, and then they just want to really set up sales offices. Whereas if you look at Israel and the UAE, they're about the same population, about the same GDP, and people say, but wait, there's a lot of differences. I'll use some that are thrown about. I'm not saying I necessarily believe in them. Israelis take a quick decision and move on. Emiratis take time to think about all the steps strategically. Yes, that's a difference, and it's a challenge. But with differences come opportunities. To look at this as how to try to figure out how to create complementary businesses, or bring businesses that bring complementary sets, I think has a very powerful story, especially when you talk about the fact that we're 3 hours apart. Now, one of the things they said, and I answer, I don't study these things, but I answer quickly. Well, what can the UAE give to Israel that's of any value other than money? You've all stayed in this hotel. For those who've never stayed in the top Israeli hotels, go take a visit. Services. Services is one thing. Like, we all know about technology, but services can go another way. That's one thing. Commercialization is big. When we talk about, for example, I know in Morocco, because we have several companies that do business in Morocco, alternative energy there is big. They have the largest solar farm in the world. They have a new algae that does carbon capture, which is a big up-and-coming business. So it's differences that if looked at through a positive lens, that can lead to really interesting opportunities. So to me, the final opportunity is not, Israeli businesses here and Emirati here and Bahraini here and Moroccan here. It's when you get entrepreneurs and businessmen from those countries that get together and launch a business. That, to me, is when you bring expertise, complementary expertise, that can be massive. So I'll take a quick break here, because I can't tell if people are bored or so if you don't ask questions, I'm stopping. Okay. Yes.
I wanted to ask about algae. You said I didn't hear properly what you were saying about that.
So there's an algae farm in Morocco that where they're using algae to do carbon capture, and you get carbon credits for that. So they have massive land, right? And you can have these massive ponds. They're lakes, really, or the plan is lakes. Right now, they're in the proof of concept phase. And that, and the climate is right, and everything is right just to capture that. And carbon credit is a very potentially lucrative business that's coming up. So, one question. Okay. I'll come back to you. Just one over there, yes?
Hi, I'm from Israel.
Hi.
I'd like to ask what you think are the most big difficulties in the relations now between Israel and the UAE?
I think the difference is there's a book by Kahneman, Daniel Kahneman, called Thinking Fast and Slow. Okay? And he doesn't say one's better than the other, just one works in certain situations and the other one works in certain situations. And Israelis think fast, they take quick decisions and don't worry about consequences. They just see an opportunity, jump at it. Emiratis sit there and want to see every step from here to the goal before they move. So you need patience. What?
I want to correct if you can refer to the difficulties. Not the difference.
No, but that's the difficulty. So what happens is, and I see this, we have 370 companies in our portfolio, and they all wanted to come at once and what happens is I tell them, let's say it takes 6 meetings to close a deal, right? It still takes 6 meetings here, but you can't fit the 6 meetings in 2 months. You've got to fit the 6 meetings in a year. If you come and try to fit the 6 meetings, you'll just burn out, get frustrated, and leave. The same thing here going the other way. If you go and you don't make clear this is long term and what the benefits are about thinking long term, the other side the Israelis will then become frustrated. We already met a month ago, we haven't heard from you. So it's really about the time line. And so what the message I try to give to these businesses from both sides is be clear on your timeline, and don't, for the Israelis, don't spend too many resources flying out every 2 weeks. And for the Emiratis, don't disappear, meet halfway and have at least updates to give, and you've got to just meet somewhere. So the biggest one is expectation of timeline between meetings. So that's one that I see. The other is the one I said earlier, is both countries have been doing business with the rest of the world for a long time, quite successfully, right? And so, like with any business, trying to open up a new market, if they already have a well-developed relationships in other markets, and this goes for both sides, is an issue. But then you miss opportunities. And again, this is from a private sector point of view. You had a question?
Yes. You said, like, for example, service is an expertise we have here.
Yes.
What's an expertise from your experience they have there that we could benefit from?
Innovation. You see, that that readiness to move fast and acceptance of failure. So one of the other differences we have, and this is a cultural difference, and Amar Ghabash sort of alluded to this when he said social can hold us back. Israelis don't see failing at a company or a project as a failure of themselves. Here, part of the reason we think the whole thing through is because culturally we see failure as a failure of us as a person. There's other reasons, because a lot of people work in the government sovereign wealth funds. You make a mistake, you wipe out $2 billion, but but part of it is cultural. So that's one of the differences. So one of the biggest things I've seen for our crowd, the bigger demand here is not for the technology. It's for investors who will move fast, right? You know, because startups, they have a 12 to 24 month runway. So you can't spend a year trying to get someone to invest. So you know, to my mind, you want to get the startup ecosystem going, the VC ecosystem going. Bring over a couple of Israeli investors here, give them Emirati money, and just let them go. You don't have to give them a lot. And that is actually very interesting, and it shows how one can do that. And then when it reaches, so this is seed A round, then when it reaches B, C round, when it's time to commercialize, bring in some Emiratis to do it, to help, not to do it, but to help on that. Again, I'm being simplistic, right? This is not but it's directional, and try to give you some thoughts from the trenches that I've run into. And I'm not talking as much about Bahrain and Morocco, because I don't know those markets as well, right? But I'm sure there are the same types of questions, the same types of ideas that can be brought up there. Yes?
Thank you so much for the talk. I wanted to know, in regard to the knowledge-based economy, is the UAE succeeding in the move to that kind of economy, or do you see it actually going quite slowly?
In the
knowledge-based economy from an oil-based economy?
No, I see it moving very quickly.
In what way?
Well, one is NYU. So a lot of the students, isn't there a program now where if you graduate from NYU, you get a lot of support, or maybe even a golden visa, something like that?
Not a program, but we have many students getting
a golden visa. So you're graduating, and they want to keep them here. Okay, MBZ UAI, we've signed as our crowd an MOU with them, because we have a subsidiary here fully owned by our crowd that does AI as a service. We already have 16 people. We're committed to invest 40 million over 4 years, and we hope to reach 50 people by the end of next year. We've hired 2 people already from MBZ UAI, and the MOU came post that, because they said, wait a second, you know, we're training all these people who are from outside, and then this knowledge is leaving. So now they want to work with us to help keep them here, attract more, and so on. And so I think it's on its way there. I don't think the knowledge part is an issue, and I didn't finish my talk, but I'll talk about one little thing. I didn't see in the definition of economic freedom, freedom of labor migration. Is it included or not, Bob?
Not formally.
Not formally. So freedom of labor migration, this is something that's important. And again, it goes to, you know, these indices and whatever. The UAE and Bahrain, I know, have, if you want to hire a foreigner into the domestic market, it's easy, like that. Okay? In most of the countries in the world, it's next to impossible. Now, those countries all come to us and tell us, yes, but people who've worked here for 20 years, you don't give them citizenship. Yeah, but your solution is not to let them in the first place. So, you know, there's 2 sides to every coin. So freedom of labor migration is a big thing, because we're not just growing our own knowledge with citizens, we're attracting foreigners. So of these 16 employees, okay, in the company, they're from 15 countries, from around the world. We can just hire the best. And why did Orcraft do it here in UAE, in Abu Dhabi? It's in ADGM, actually, instead of Israel. Israel has a great domestic supply of AI talent, but the demand for that AI talent far outstrips it, right? So we're somewhere close by here. Top two came from New York, where they were, the top one used to head Deutsche Bank, CTO at Deutsche Bank Global, CTO at E-Trade Global, so on, so Merrill Lynch. And, you know, so that's knowledge that we've imported. It's, to me, it's foreign direct investment. It's not financial foreign direct investment, but it's foreign direct investment. Yes?
So first of all, thank you, it's very interesting. I want to ask, it's from my point of view, so if I say anything that I'm not correct, so feel free to correct me. I'm, as an Israeli entrepreneur, want to ask, I used to raise money myself, and I feel, and tell me if it's wrong, but in Israel, still pre-seed, seed, and even round A, it's very common to raise money from or Israeli ventures or American ones, because they are the ones who can get you to the market and give you customers, etc. And only in very late rounds, so they go outside, for example, for Abu Dhabi and other places. And I want to ask, from a perspective, if it's something that you want to change, and also invest money in seed and pre-seed, and how do you see it?
So there's three things that I see Abu Dhabi with. It's five things, but let me talk about three main pillars that I see. I talked about two: capital and capital access and talent access. Third is market access. Okay. Now, if you want to go, if you come to Abu Dhabi, for example, or the UAE, I should say, you have market access to Africa, Middle East, and Southeast Asia. Actually, Morocco is stronger, which is why one of my employees is the head of business development is Moroccan, based out of Morocco. For Africa, if you're talking about Africa. So the idea that the first mistake in looking at market access is thinking of these countries just as a destination. They're not. They're a gateway, right? And they can do that. You just don't know it because it's a young relationship. Plus, it's complementary to, let's say, an American company, because the access they will give you usually is not the access to the countries that you have here. Also, the type of business is different. So, you know, one of the things you've got to be careful of is that if you go to the US, let's say medtech is a big thing, right? Medtech, when it's very high margin, you go to the US because of the way their insurance works and so on, right? But here, even in the UAE, you know, I remember we had one portfolio company that was selling machines at $750,000 a piece. They just told them, go away. And we're richer, you know, most of this area is LMICs, low and middle income countries. But low margin companies never get a partner or investor in the US because there's high margin. But low margin, with the 4 billion people you can hit with a short flight from here, makes a lot of sense. It's not that one's better than the other. It's a different operating model that demands a different market, go-to-market strategy and market selection. So yes, it does, but not the ones who compete with the US. Again, any entrepreneur around the world, the first market they'd like to go to outside of their domestic market is the US. But that's a really big jump that requires a lot of luck. You know, it's not that only the good ones go. You gotta be good, and you have to be very lucky because they're flooded. What happens is then you have a lot of other companies that never happened are stillborn. What happens is they sell the IP because they never get to develop And so they don't get the multiples that you'd get with a high value company.
Very common phrase there.
Yeah, I mean, that's why what I'm working on here is scale-up funds. So at the BC level, where you have, which is more interesting for investors here, where you already have the product, you have some market penetration, but now you want to take off and hit multiple markets. That's the market access. This is a good place to come. Okay. Yeah.
So I'll try to be a gracious host and not ask you something very provocative. But I would say it this way. So, first of all, 5-6 years ago, we would never believe there would be Abraham Accords. And who would ever believe I'd be sitting here in Abu Dhabi with students from Israel, UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, learning together, learning the right principles about how to make a better world. So is the probability greater than 50% or less than 50% when I do the next one next year? Joining these countries will also be students from Saudi Arabia.
No, they'll be, in my opinion, it's for us, the countries who are already in the Abraham Accords, to show the value of the Abraham Accords, right? I know there's a lot of interest. John Medved has traveled several times to Saudi Arabia at the request of the government on his foreign passport, not the Israeli, but still, as his capacity as the CEO and founder of an Israeli company. But I think this is a new experiment in terms of what are the payoffs. There's commercial payoffs and others, educational, political, social, so on, and payoffs and costs. And I think people are just trying to figure it out. I think it showed an entrepreneurial spirit, for the UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco to enter into the Abraham Accords, because there's a lot of unknowns, and I think right now it's the payoff. It's part of the reason I jumped in, to see if I can leave an impact. And again, it's not for me political. It's just sort of not humanitarian, humanity.
So greater than 50% or less than 50%?
Less than 50%.
Greater than 25%?
I'm not playing 20 questions now. If I could get that specific, I'd be a consultant and charging like $10 million a pop for that.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Claire from Israel. I wanted to ask you, me as an individual and us as individuals, how would you like us to approach you, the Emirates, in order to make business? Because I feel like I need this step in order to approach you to make any business. So how would you recommend it? How would you like us to?
Well, this is the type of thing. You're working, you're meeting with people, and you're not asking business on the first go, right? So I remember the first time I ran into this was actually the Russians. It was Amr Ghabash. He brought delegations of Russians, and the first thing, there's no hello, there's no nothing. Okay, what do you have business for us? Okay, I don't know who you are, what you do, what kind of person are you, whatever. So it's this. This was a great step. You got to do something and learn things, without it just being about business. Second thing is learn, right? If you're speaking, if you're the one who started the requested the meeting, if you're speaking for more than 30% of the meeting, there's a problem. And if that 30% is in the first half of the meeting, that's an even bigger problem. Start with questions, gentle questions, and lead in, understand. One of the biggest things is, I've got this great product. Yes, but you don't know what challenges I want to solve. So, you know, like one of the good things John did was, you know, when his competitors, when the Abraham Accords was signed, his competitors all got empty bags and flew over. He went to his friends in New York and said, I need an Emirati to work with. You guys have worked in the Emirates. I need one to work with. And my plan to him, I told him, if you want someone to raise money, I'm not it, and you won't raise a penny. He said, what do we do? He said, I told him, you understand what are the objectives of the government, the businesses, and so on. Understand what solutions you can give. And then see if there's an overlap. So if you're a business person, you want to do business, fine. But who here wants to do that business? You got to target them. You know, when you talk about the sovereign wealth funds, everyone's going to the sovereign wealth fund. Sovereign wealth fund is not about a pure financial return. Okay, they have policy objectives as well. And if you read one of the things I tell people who want to come here and not listen to me because they're like, okay, have you heard of Vision 2030 or Ghadan 21? Read it, it's online. Understand the policy objectives. You know, there's certain things they want and certain things that are not a priority. So do your research and then come ask and understand who's who and what's what. And stay away from makhrs, okay? It's just, you know, like I remember when I first started working with Israelis, they were scared about the makhrs who come. Makhr يعني how do I ها؟ إيه يعني تاجر يعني كلكجي يعني. And I said, what are you talking about? We have them all here from every country. You just have the ones from one country. We have from 195 countries. Trust me, you know, we're used to it. And no one here likes the middleman. So if anyone says, I'll help to introduce you to someone, I introduce Bob to many people, but I don't ask for money. Because the minute someone comes to you and says, I'll introduce you, but you have to pay me, he'll do the introduction. But the other side, no, that he's the kind of, and it will reflect badly on you. Just keep reaching out, keep meeting people, and keep going. And you have to think of it as a long-term strategic, right? So it's not about doing business here. It's about building the relationship, and then the business will come. Okay? Thank you.